And the trial continues for the mother of school shooter Ethan Crumbley. His parents have been in jail for more than 2 years awaiting trial.
I'm like so sorry. Can we just have a minute? Like a break or can we have a 10-minute break, please? I need to run to the bathroom. I need a break.
Honestly, it read as pretty unprofessional and a bizarre thing for a defense attorney to do.
You also don't deny that that gun was gifted by you and your husband to your son on November 26th.
No, I don't. We find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Should the legal guardian of a minor mass shooter be held responsible?
This was sent to you, so Sean Hawkins called you at 9:24 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
Okay, you called him back at 9:27.
Correct.
You had a 5-minute phone call.
Correct.
And then in that phone call, he texted you the picture with it was drawn out, and he emailed you this original picture.
Yeah, he texted me the modified one and then later emailed me this one.
Later is at 9:32.
Yeah, like after I asked him for it.
You looked at it.
I did.
Okay. You told us yesterday you found it, I think your quote was, a little concerning. What struck you about this?
Originally, when I saw the modified one, I was kind of angry at my son because we just talked about his missing assignments in geometry and his E the night before. Then when I got this one and opened it, it was concerning. I honestly thought the guy on there was a poor drawing of Batman, the way the thing in the cat. I thought it was a cape. I didn't know.
You thought that was a cape?
I did. I didn't look at that closely.
What did you think of the gun?
I thought it was a gun.
Yeah. What about the fact that it is identical to the gun that you got him for Christmas a couple days before?
I mean, honestly, it looks like a gun to me. I didn't even notice.
Well, you took a picture of the gun. You posted it on Instagram. You know what it looks like.
I do, but I didn't analyze it.
You saw Special Agent Brandon's testimony. He described how it's identical. And you told us yesterday how your son was a good drawer.
He's a very good drawer.
Okay. What about the thoughts won't stop, help me? Did that ring out to you?
Yes, that was what was concerning to me.
Blood everywhere, and there's a bullet. And actually, you were the one who bought the bullets on November the 27th.
Correct.
You later came to learn that those bullets were used in the shooting.
I did.
Okay. Now, you don't deny that your son wrote in his journal that he asked his parents for help. You don't deny that evidence that was admitted?
No, I don't.
Okay. And you don't deny that he wrote in his journal that he now had access to the 6-hour 9mm handgun.
I do not deny that.
And you don't deny that the 6-hour 9mm handgun was in fact the murder weapon.
I don't deny that.
Hi, and welcome back to today's episode of True Crime Producer. I'm your host, Chantal. So today we are talking about something so horrific yet so pervasive, especially in the United States of America, and that's school shootings. Today in particular, we're focusing in on the case of Ethan Crumbley. Now, Ethan and his story has been in the news quite a bit because his mother was recently criminally charged. So today, let's do a deep dive on what happened that fateful day and see if his parents are to blame, or if this was an act that only Ethan can be blamed for. Let's look at the background of it. Ethan Crumbley was 15 years old when this horrendous act happened. The date was November 30th, 2021, and Ethan shot and killed 4 people during a passing period. The victims whose lives he claimed were Madison Baldwin, age 17, Tate Meyer, age 16, Hannah St. Juliana, age 14, and Justin Schilling, age 17. So Ethan, before this, had been seen as a bit of an outcast. Prosecutors say that his only good friend moved away end of October 2021, so just a month before he committed these acts. His family dog had also died recently, and he had been very depressed. As early as March 2021, he had been sending his mother pretty disturbing text messages talking about ghosts and demons in his mind. And after reviewing his journals and what he had written in them, it's pretty clear that Ethan was a very troubled child. He clearly was suffering with immense mental illness, and he had what seemed to be a fixation on school shootings. The prosecutors mentioned numerous drawings that he had done, which showed bullets. They showed school shootings. He was kind of scribbling bullets on, the back of tests. He at one point was even caught researching ammunition on his phone while at school. So we'll dive into all of this in a little bit, but there's no question that Ethan was a very, very troubled child. And on that fateful day, November 30th, 2021, he acted on these urges, really, what I can only describe as like very, very dark and sick urges, which is to harm those around him, presumably make other people, his peers, feel what he felt was his pain he wanted to inflict on other people as well. There's really no use in deep diving into the psychology behind a school shooter, what makes a school shooter, but the outcome is the same. He wreaked havoc on not only the victims, but the lives of the family members of the victims. I mean, if you haven't seen the testimony that the victims' families have given, I highly suggest it. They are incredibly difficult to watch, and some of the more heartbreaking videos I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they are horrendous to watch, but it's important that we do, just so even as humans, we can have some small understanding of what these parents are going through, what incredible injustice they are facing for the rest of their lives because of the actions of this 15-year-old boy who woke up one day and decided, I'm going to explode the lives of however many people I can get my hands on. And that's exactly what he did. So I highly suggest checking out the testimony of the victims' parents and families and friends, just to try to get some understanding of what it is that they're going through.
My name is Madeline Johnson, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of myself, my family, and my best friend, Madison Baldwin. I was a senior at Oxford High School when the shooting happened, and I would like to start this off by sharing the shirt I'm wearing. Madison used to draw me doodles on gum wrappers, and I'd keep them. One day she gifted me the one on the front of my shirt, and she said that it was the two of us as dinosaurs, best friends, even in the prehistoric times. This is one of the only things I have left to remember her by. This is the back.
Thank you.
The moment it really sank in that she was gone forever was the day we had to go back to the high school. I sat in my ceramics class, our favorite class, and I watched as students poured through the door, and I waited for her to come sit at her seat right next to me, and I waited and waited, and I finally realized that she was never coming. For a long time, I blamed myself. I should have continued to walk her to class because that made me think this would be different. I blamed those stupid courtyard doors for being locked on us because if we'd taken the shortcut, she would still be here. But now I realize where the blame truly lies, and it lies with that monster sitting over there who can't even look at me.
So then we get to Meyer, and I met my wife there, and as all the kids are filing into Meyer, Sherry and I are both walking around looking for Tater. And I had a feeling something didn't feel right to me. And so as people started to, as kids and parents started slowly fading out of Meyer, I grabbed our athletic director who was at Meyer and said, "Where's Tate? Have you seen Tate?" And he looked at me and he said, "No." But he knew, but he couldn't tell me. He wasn't the one to tell me. So as we're wandering around Meyer asking everybody if they've seen Tate, we got summoned to the manager's office at Meyer, and were delivered the news that Tate wasn't with us anymore. And the thing that stands out to me was what my wife said. She put her head in her hands and it said, "Not my baby boy." So, we walk out of the room in shock, not really sure if what we heard was real and true. So we had to make our calls to Trent and Ty, and I can't remember who I called and who Sherry called, but I didn't know how to say it. I don't know. I can't remember who it was, Trent or Ty, who I talked to, and I didn't know how to soften it, and I basically said Tate was killed, and so the boys came to Meyer, and we left as a family to go home, and when we got home, we were just a bunch of zombies, and we were kind of walking around. And believe it or not, we cooked dinner that night, and had a couple visitors. And as we kind of are working our way through this process, it's been quite a journey. I can tell you that. The one thing that is love is obviously absent from our family, because there's no joy.
I will not allow her name to be followed by the phrase Oxford shooting victim. She will be remembered by her name, a name that is loved unconditionally, one that has no hidden remark, the strong name we gave her, Madison. When I received word that the school was under attack, my daughter had already been gone for over an hour. This I didn't know while driving into a designated area pretty much on autopilot, waiting for the unknown. As I paced the Myers asking where my daughter was, all I received was blank stares. As the remaining kids reunited with their families, we were left there in silence, waiting for the answers that we are still waiting for. Next thing I hear, can the family of Madison Baldwin follow me? As I walked into the room, I felt this chill come across my body, so cold that I felt it in my bones. I pleaded not to go in, but following command, the words we heard were, "I don't have good news on these 3 children. They are deceased." The sheer blunt statement could destroy you to the core. I was completely paralyzed. I felt every scream that came from my body. I felt every breath I took was fading. My mind was in a state of dementia, and then my body drops to the floor. We were literally suffocating together in disbelief. Replaying those words in my head, within seconds, I thought, did I hear them right? I was definitely misinformed. The sobs came from a deep part in me, Tears soaked the cold floor I laid on. I managed a few calls, but conversations I've blocked out. Leaving for the substation, I stared out the window, looking for her, but replaying those words in my head. My mind and heart were literally in two different places. The rest of the night was excuse after excuse on why I couldn't be taken to my daughter. I needed to see her. I needed to prove that the information was not meant for me. But all I was offered was a table the next day at the medical examiner's office to identify her. Getting back home felt like forever. I had to tell her 11-year-old sister at the time that her best friend was gone. Peyton's screams will forever haunt me. And when she asked me that simple question, why? As a mom, I didn't have the answer.
So Crumbley pleaded guilty to all of the charges back in October of 2022. So less than a year after he had committed the acts. He's back in the news now, and this whole story is really back in the news because Ethan Crumbley's parents are the first parents in American history to be criminally charged for a mass shooting that their child committed. Now, this sets up a pretty historic precedent. I mean, it is putting blame not only in the child who committed these acts, the minor who committed the shooting, but also his legal guardians, those who are supposed to be watching him, those who are supposed to be keeping him safe, but also in certain circumstances, clearly in this one, they're supposed to be keeping other people safe from their offspring. So there's some controversy around this idea. I mean, at what age does a teenager become accountable for their actions? Is the responsibility ever solely on their shoulders? If you start, putting blame on other people, can it spread elsewhere? I mean, are we then going to be charging the school or et cetera? These are arguments that are being made. However, after doing a deep dive on just what happened behind closed doors in Ethan's home, and also knowing what the parents knew, it is pretty damn obvious that his parents are incredibly culpable in these murders of these children. So let's take a look at some of the things that his parents, well, specifically we're going to focus in on his mom because his mom's trial just happened. His dad's trial is happening in March. So let's take a look first at just what his mom knew and some examples there. Multiple concerns were raised about Ethan from the school. So like I had mentioned already, he had been caught drawing bullets on tests. One example that I read was a pretty bloody and gory example. This was a drawing of a bullet, and the following words were written above the bullet: blood everywhere. And then between the drawing of the gun and the bullet is a drawing of a person who appears to have been shot twice, who is bleeding. And then below the figure is a drawing of a laughing emoji. And then underneath that is the phrase, "My life is useless." And then to the right of those words is, "The world is dead." A very dark drawing, a very dark scribble to be on a test. So rightfully so, the school raised concerns. And they brought this to the attention of Ethan Crumbley's parents. And the fact of the matter is they just did not do anything about it. The school suggested that Ethan meet with a counselor within the next 48 hours. And his parents essentially said, "We have work. So no, we're not gonna take him right now." Just a couple hours after that, Ethan opened fire at the school. Aside from that, when it was brought to his attention that Ethan had been researching ammunition while at school, his mom texted him and said, "LOL, I'm not mad. You just have to learn how not to get caught." If that isn't just blatant disregard for your son's clear mental health issues, then I don't know what is. I know if I had a son or a daughter, a child, whatever, who was researching ammunition on their phone at high school, all the alarm bells would be raised. We live in a country where school shootings are prevalent and they're incredibly common. Kids hear about them all the time. I know my younger sister, when she goes to high school, she is scared to walk into high school all the time for fear of a school shooting. It's many parents' number one biggest fear in this country. And to be a parent and know that your child is researching ammunition, your child with a history of mental health issues, and to not do anything about it is truly, I think, criminal. Not only that, the really insane kicker here is even after, all these concerns had been raised and these, drawings had been seen, etc., Ethan's parents still bought him a gun. Now, in my mind, that just absolutely seals the deal. Not only are you illegally purchasing a firearm for a minor, you are literally enabling a mentally ill child who has expressed desires and fears about shooting up a school. And they still bought him a handgun. They put a gun into the hands of a mentally ill child who attends a public middle school, who is clearly a bit of an outcast, which is unforgivable, I think. I mean, what do you guys think about this situation? It seems to me that they were clearly enabling a murderer. And, even after the school had raised all of these concerns and brought it to Ethan's attention, or Ethan's parents' attention, they never once mentioned, hey, by the way, he has access to a gun. And this is presumably to cover their own asses. They're probably frightened of the fact that maybe they had done something wrong or something not wise and had put a gun in the hands of a mentally unstable child. But whatever the reason, they still never told the school. What's pretty damning, though, is 7 minutes after the first news report came out showing that the school was under attack, Ethan's mom, Jennifer Crumbley, sent Ethan a text message and said, "Ethan, don't do it." She knew. She absolutely knew. A little while after that, Ethan's dad called 911 and reported his handgun missing, or the gun missing that was in his name, but they had bought for Ethan. Again, very damning. Imagine hearing that your child's school is under attack and your gut instinct is, that's my child. My child is the shooter. I know after listening to all the testimony that the other parents didn't have that reaction. Their reaction was, I need to get to the school immediately to make sure my child's okay. And for 4 of those parents, that wasn't the reality. Their children were dead. And they had to be told, your child is deceased. They're never walking out of this godforsaken high school ever again. But no, in the Crumbley's case, their intuition was correct, that it was their son. Not texting concern, not texting like, hey, are you okay? Well, I guess Jennifer did say that initially, but not like, hey, are you hiding from the gunman? Are you safe? But don't do it. So that to me just shows that they knew. They absolutely knew. And if you have an inkling or an inclination that your child is capable of this, to the point where you hear that kind of news and you run to them and tell them not to do it, your responsibility should have kicked in way earlier than that. And you should have pulled your kid out of school or got them in counseling and got them in therapy immediately. But the prosecution, even without all of these elements, the prosecution painted Jennifer Crumbley as a negligent parent pretty much through and through. She was, at least in the way that she's portrayed by the prosecution, she was very preoccupied with extramarital affairs. She was preoccupied with her horses. She was kind of in her own world. And despite the fact that Ethan had called out for help multiple times, she laughed in his face. She never made the effort to get him the help that he needed. And again, I keep saying she because we haven't heard the dad's trial yet. I'm sure he is just as culpable. Truly, I think that he's just as culpable. And we'll see that next month. But I'm saying she because her trial is the one that we've heard. So the prosecution mentioned that Jennifer spent many days a week, 3 to 5 days a week, at her ranch tending to her horses, which is a pretty notoriously expensive hobby. But she was on this ranch making sure that her horses were fed and they were taken care of. And in addition to that, she was also very into polyamory. So she was spending a lot of her time setting up dates and meetups with people outside of her marriage. And no judgment on people who are polyamorous. If that's what your relationship is and it works for you, that's great. But if you are putting that ahead of your clearly mentally unstable child, there's an issue. It doesn't matter if it's polyamory or horses or board games for that matter. If you're a parent with a mentally unstable child with violent tendencies, that has to come first, especially if that child is still in public school and around other kids every single day. And as a parent, somebody that had a child, whether they chose to or not, that is the responsibility you have. If you decide to keep your child and you were raising them as your own, it is your responsibility now. There was another thing that she said on the stand, which was just, in my opinion, very damning. She said that she has looked back, of course, after everything has happened and asked herself if she would have done anything differently. And she says she wouldn't have. Which is so insane to me, to sit in a courtroom and admit that you wouldn't do anything differently, despite the fact that your child has killed 4 other children and ruined countless other families and traumatized children and teachers and assistant principals for the rest of their lives. You are going to have the gall to say you wouldn't do anything differently? I mean, it just screams ignorant to me, lack of remorse, like sociopathic almost. And I think that was definitely a turning point in her trial. So looking forward, it sets a really interesting precedent for other cases. Now, of course, this is just happening in Michigan, so it's not as though this is going to have a huge effect on cases, all over the United States, and it certainly will on Ethan's dad's trial. But the consequences are dire. They're enormous for something like this. Obviously, Ethan's going to spend the rest of his life in jail, as he should. In no world does he not fully deserve that, 15 years old or not. After listening to the trial, it seems pretty, clear to me that there's a world in which, if he had had some more help and support, it could have been avoided. Another reason this case is getting attention is because the trial itself is pretty bizarre. There are some weird moments in it. The one thing that I've seen circulating a bit is the assistant principal gives a heart-wrenching and devastating testimony where she recalls just what happened that day.
The students that I know pretty well went running by and said, "Get the hell out of here." And he was laughing and running, and I was like, that was a mixed message.
Sure. At that point, was there an announcement on the loudspeaker?
No, not at that point, no.
Was he the only one running?
Shortly after him, there was a group of kids laughing and running behind him. When I stopped to ask them what was going on, they weren't entirely sure. But as kids started to pass, you could see it got more serious.
Okay.
I grabbed my walkie-talkie and I
What do you mean it got more serious? What do you mean by that?
their faces got more, I'm sorry, their faces became more serious.
Did that signify something to you when you saw that?
Yeah, just something, them running signified something to me because it's not a typical behavior.
Okay.
But the running and laughing was confusing, and then when their faces became more serious, I was started to get very worried, and that's when I grabbed my walkie-talkie.
Okay. What'd you do with your walkie-talkie?
I said, I'm not sure what's happening, but kids are running in the hallway, which is very odd, and look like they're trying to leave the building.
So where did you go?
They shortly after I got on the walkie, they went to Alice Alert, and so
What's Alice Alert?
Alice Alert is our intruder. I'm going to call it intruder alert because that's what it was that day. But it's a notice that we need to take cover, lock down, be aware. It's an emergency assistance.
An alarm ringing, or is that somebody who's giving a message over the PA system?
On that day, it was a message over the PA system.
Do you recall who gave that message?
Steve Wolf.
And who was that?
Steve is our principal.
He's the principal. Okay. So, is this shortly after you saw the students leaving that appeared to be more serious to you?
Practically the same. Yeah, it was like they went, when the more serious students came by, the announcement went on.
Okay. Now, when you hear that announcement, what were you supposed to do?
I'm supposed to lock down.
Did you?
No.
What did you do?
I went to check the hallways to make sure people were okay.
When you first started to check the hallways, did you see anybody?
The hallways cleared so fast. When I made the turn down the 400 hallway, I ran into a teacher who was locking his door, and then a student came up who was running late. He asked if it was a drill. I let him know that it didn't matter if it was a drill or not, just you got to take cover, get in there. And then I proceeded down the hallway. I was the only one in the hallway at that point.
Did you hear anything?
First, I smelled something. I smelled what I thought was cap gun.
Okay.
Later, figured out it was gunpowder. And then I heard two gunshots.
Where were you when you first smelled what you thought to be cap gun?
Probably by like the somewhere between 409 and 414.
So you were continuing to walk down that hallway, the 400 hallway, towards the 200 hallway? That's in yellow highlight?
Yes, that's where I heard the gunshots. I was going that direction.
You were walking towards the gunshots?
Yep. Yes.
As you walked down that hallway, did you see anybody else?
No.
Tell me where you went.
When I got to the end of the hallway, I realized how dumb this is. I turned left to go towards where I heard the gunshots.
So this hallway.
And I went towards 225.
So you came down the 400 hallway and you turned left towards 225?
Yes.
Tell us what you saw when you made a left.
I saw a student laying on the ground.
Did you know who he was?
I didn't at that time, no. His face was covered. And then as I continued a couple of steps, I could see another student walking my direction. He had just dropped his arm was up, and then he dropped his arm.
Did you recognize him?
Not at that point, no. He was too far away.
What did you do when you saw a student on the ground?
There was a garbage can between he and I, so I moved the garbage can out of the way, and I put my foot near him and nudged him and told him to stay there.
Did he respond?
No.
Could you tell if he was injured at that point?
You could tell he was injured.
Her reaction, instead of, running into one of the classroom doors and closing it, was to go towards the sounds of the bullets. And, as you're watching it, it becomes very clear that you are watching the testimony of a hero, somebody that puts their own life in jeopardy in order to, save, or at least try to save, the lives of children. It's a very, very moving testimony to watch, and I highly suggest it. I wasn't the only one that was moved. People in the courtroom, were obviously very moved as well. But the one that really stood out was how moved Jennifer Crumbley's defense attorney was. She said, actually, at the end of it, that she couldn't really think straight right now, and then said, "I don't have any questions for you. I'm sorry." And then proceeded to, clearly she was like blowing her nose. She was crying. She looked really disheveled and kind of all over the place. And then she asked if they could take a 10-minute break.
Who's the next witness?
It's Cammy back.
Jennifer, is there any way we can have like a minute?
Say it again.
I'm like so sorry. Can we just have a minute, like a break, or we have a 10-minute break, please?
Sure. Sure. I'm gonna give you a 10-minute break, okay?
All rise for the jury.
Okay. You are on the record. And you
Your Honor, this court, upon the defense's request, instructed the prosecutors not to show emotion. You instructed the prosecutors to tell our witnesses not to show emotion, and you instructed us to let our victims know.
I don't think that's actually what I said.
I understand the ruling, Your Honor. I do. You're concerned about influence of the jury. I take no issue with it, but it was a difficult thing. It's difficult, and we're doing it. And then to have not just the defendant, her lawyer, sit there sobbing.
I did not sob.
I just want to finish, Your Honor. I just want to finish. I think if that is the instruction, we are trying really hard to respect the court's instruction, because I understand the reason for it.
Okay, I didn't tell people not to show emotion. Some of that is involuntary, but there have been times in this courtroom during trials when people will show facial expressions, or things like that, or make comments. I understand this is a very emotional situation for everyone here, right? If someone was audibly sobbing in the audience, I would hope that they would exit. And as you said, the reason for it. I didn't tell anybody not to show emotion. I guess some emotion is involuntary. So I guess I'm asking what you're asking of me.
I think it should apply to both sides.
First of all, I was not sobbing.
Honestly, it read as pretty unprofessional and a bizarre thing for a defense attorney to do. Like, this is the testimony of a woman that was directly affected by the actions of her client's son. And yet, she's going to behave in this way. It just read as really weird for me. What did you think about it? Did it come off as weird to you as it did to me? It seemed, just super unprofessional and bizarre.
And this is horrific. I've
never seen this before.
It's horrific. That's why we asked the court not to play it. This is horrific. I don't know how the prosecutor. She's watched it 100 times with these witnesses. It's horrific.
You've had this video for over 2 years.
I don't know. I don't have this video. I have to go to their office to watch it.
You've seen it?
No, I haven't, because it's not necessary. It's not relevant to my client's case. We've already litigated this, but we're doing our best. We were not sobbing or making a scene in any way. All my eye makeup's still on. I checked my camera.
I'm not having
I need to run to the bathroom. I need a break.
Okay, we're having a break. That's what we're doing.
I have a small idea of the fear that these people, feel sending their kids to school every day, in a country where this shit is common. But in reality, no one is ever going to have any idea of the level of pain and horror that the parents and the siblings and the friends of the victims felt on that day and will feel for the rest of their lives. And while I truly believe that Ethan Crumbley deserves to rot in prison for the rest of his life, I do think his parents need to be held accountable as well, especially after watching the trial and seeing what I've seen and knowing what they know. I think it's pretty clear that they failed in their due diligence as parents. If you guys have watched any of the trial, let me know your thoughts on it. Yeah. Do you think this is the right move? Do you think that the parents deserve to be punished as well? Or do you think this is unfair? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.